welcome to another deep dive. Today, super special guest. I have with me Sawyer. Sawyer, welcome.
Hey, how you doing? Great to be here.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just kick it off with the easy question. You can give us the elevator pitches. Um, Sawyer works with Scale, and Scale is, I guess you can call it like a new project, or is this a completely different project you're working with? Please explain what is fair and how does it, yeah, relate
Yeah,
to Scale?
for sure. So great question. For those of you that are not familiar, Scale has actually been around for over 7 years now. It's been live on mainnet, in production for over 5 years. And Scale is a very unique and innovative project, in my opinion, probably one of the most in the space, consistently. What is Scale? Scale is a network of Ethereum compatible layer one blockchains, um, that have a variety of, we'll call them either improved efficiency features or just improvements over a traditional EVM. These are things like zero gas fees, which is one of the things that, if you are familiar with Scale, you've probably heard of or are somewhat aware of. It's generally I'll call it the claim to fame, as well as a variety of other features like humongous block gas limits, larger contract sizes. It's the only EVM with single slot, which means one block confirmation finality in production today. And it's got literally a list of other amazing features, which I can dive into later. Um, Fair is the new layer one blockchain coming out of the Scale ecosystem. It's backed and built by the same team. And what it is it's essentially a more permissionless layer one. So where Scale falls into this kind of world of app chains or application specific chains, we do have some hubs, but again, we won't get too deep there. Fair is more so designed as a permissionless chain, right? So you can think of it as, Scale kind of competes more so head to head with like your Avalanche subnets or your kind of your L2s, even though they're L1s, but kind of those L2 app chains. Whereas Fair is going to be more of your competitor against like functionally any permissionless layer one because anybody can deploy to it, anyone can use it. And then with Fair, there's a whole bunch of again just amazing. Kind of amazing improvements, features, things like that. I don't want to ramble forever, so I'll pause there and we can kind of dive deeper into Fair as we go here.
Yeah, no, I think the thing is, like, I've been following Scale for a long time. Like, disclaimer, I have a t-shirt from you guys from like 2018. It's like
We'll
crazy early. Yeah, it was like,
we'll have to get you a mug to match.
there you go.
These are new, so
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like I had always dismissed Scale going back. Like, we can just be on, like you had it came about like in times of like back in 2019 whenever people were like, "Oh, it's going to be a gasless chain that's has these ginormous blocks." And they interrupt seamlessly with each other. And then it seems like the space is moving toward, it seems like the design was roughly correct in some ways, which is
yes,
kind of cool.
yes. I would definitely agree with you there. I think it's one of those things where it's almost like Scale was maybe a bit too early.
Yes.
Um, I think over the years, what we've seen is even though the industry, the specific category of the industry itself has arguably not done great at all, which is Web3 gaming, Scale has dominated Web3 gaming. And that's because we've been able to work with projects to do things that other chains just can't compete with, right? Like the average gamer doesn't want to pay 5 cents or 2 cents a transaction to play, and they also don't really want to wait, 5 minutes for finality for something to be done. Um, and so we've definitely seen a huge kind of, I would say, win there. And it's allowed us to, kind of drive into this top, we use DApp Radar pretty religiously. Love that team, great data. And, per DApp Radar, Scale's consistently ranked, top 5, 6 in terms of, unique active wallets and transactions, which are some of the metrics the space has chosen to use as kind of valuing where these chains sit. Now, not just gaming, but in addition, we also have one of the most compute intensive application chains in the world, which is called XORed. XORed is like this little hidden gem that most people have never heard of. Um, and what it does, it's essentially it was one of the first successful on-chain DPINs. So what they do is they have all these nodes that run and they scrape internet data, they scrape social data, and they commit it on-chain, and then they do this reveal scheme. And what it allows for is on-chain decentralized sentiment analysis. Really cool. These guys are pumping like millions of transactions on-chain every day. The blocks and transactions are humongous. It would cost millions of dollars to run this on any other kind of blockchain, right? L2, L3, L1, and they do it on a scale chain. And so it just goes to show that, I think to your point, maybe a little bit too early, but the industry is definitely kind of feels like converging deeply on this, especially with a lot of the enterprise kind of
Yeah.
push recently. And I think Scale's very well positioned to capture more and more of that audience, as it kind of grows and
Yeah, I mean
uh,
it's just like the
expands.
the idea of even like the more private blockchains and do you need to be purely decentralized and for World War III? Like that idea is now being revisited, you could say. And yeah, it is what it is, I guess
Yeah,
you could say. Um,
yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see where that falls. I think
right.
there's other benefits to decentralization that people don't think about, um, especially when it comes to private data. And like, I guess how private is your data if it's hand- like I think a good example. Literally this morning I saw this thing. It's some like scroll L3, and they're doing private transactions, focusing on privacy more and more and more. I think it's a good question of will these L2s and L3s be able to properly secure data for enterprises if it's just a single machine operated by some third party? Do they actually meet the requirements you need to be an enterprise on chain? And my stance is no. I think you'll actually need decentralization in some form to ensure you are protected enough and not, well, vulnerable from day one. But
All right. Well, that might be a whole different discussion as far as privacy goes. Um,
yes.
Back to kind of fair. So knowing you guys, in the past you had pivoted Scale towards focusing kind of on gaming and enterprise, it seemed, and then, but now with fair, you're sort of kind of doing the counter trend and moving in a more decentralized way. But it would seem like, would it be wrong to say that the user is not the traditional Web3 user that you're expecting?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that's a very broad question, and there's probably maybe five different answers to it. So I'll try to keep them all pretty brief. Maybe just going to the important ones here. But so to kind of give the deep or like the intro into Fair, right? So I know I give the intro to Scale. I'd be yelled at badly by my team if I didn't give a nice deep dive into Fair real quick. So what is Fair? Fair is a layer one blockchain built on a lot of the core technology that we've been building, perfected, and are some of, again, I think the best at in the space at building layer ones over the past 7 years. Fair is embodying that in a permissionless L1. Now, the thing that Fair is bringing to the table that Scale doesn't have yet, it will get at some point, but that Scale doesn't have yet, is proof of encryption. So privacy is obviously becoming a very big thing, but more so not just in terms of raw privacy, in terms of being able to do things securely in the same transaction in the same block. That's something we're lacking a lot across layer ones and layer twos. Right. And I think the probably biggest elephant right now in blockchain is MEV, maximal extractable value. And that is what Fair is kind of solving and bringing to the table, in addition to the benefits to scale, which I will talk about. But this MEV is not just a handicap in terms of taking money out of users' pockets in a lot of cases through sandwich attacks, front running, back running. It's actually blocking innovation for DeFi. The last couple of years, I think the really two biggest probably improvements in DeFi. This may be like people will yell at me and say they disagree. I think it's probably prediction markets, which we're seeing obviously get very hot the last couple of weeks, and yield chasing. That's like the two big things and obviously like stable coins, but that's less DeFi. But we haven't really seen a ton of innovation on on-chain orders, on the ability to do private shielded actions, things like that, because the primitives don't exist. And so that's really what Fair is bringing to the table is this ability to unlock not just billions in user value that's being lost to MEV, but trillions in economic activity that can now come on chain through encrypted triggers, private transactions, things like that. And so that's really what Fair's focused on is the next level of DeFi, that innovative DeFi.
Yeah, so I guess to briefly say how Fair works, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's like a network of validators who run Ts, right? They run these things, and then you submit your encrypted transaction to them, and it executes fairly. Correct?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So from a design perspective, if you are familiar with traditional layer one blockchains, we have a bunch of nodes. Those nodes can be running functionally. It's a computer, right? A node's a computer at the end of the day. So they're all running computers, and inside each of these nodes is software, right? And the database. The software is basically the execution environment and consensus, right? Consensus is how these nodes come to agreement. So within each of these fair nodes, we also are running a T, like you mentioned. And so we use Intel SGX. That Intel SGX T is where the actual magic of threshold encryption happens and all the really cool mathematical stuff we can dive into as time permits. And essentially, what happens is you submit your transaction to a blockchain. The nodes come to consensus. They share that transaction. It gets added to a block. Um, and it gets appended to the chain. Some blockchains use more of a leader style consensus where you send it to a node, goes in the mempool, nodes pick it, gets added to the block, then they come to consensus after through attestation and voting. We do consensus before that block is ever posted. And so, because of how we do our consensus, what we can now do is we can actually encrypt the transaction before it ever gets sent to the chain. So, instead of saying, just say, for example, you're a validator. Instead of me saying, hey, I want to swap 10 USDC for, 10 fair tokens, now what's happening is I'm saying, hey, can you please tell me what the chain's BLS public key is? You respond back with that. I encrypt my transaction with that BLS public key, which is essentially just a public key. I then submit the encrypted transaction to you. You can't read it. None of the validators can read it. Once you guys process this transaction through consensus, basically, is it good or bad? Then you can collect decryption shares from all the other validators. Once you have the supermajority, aka greater than two-thirds, you can decrypt this transaction and execute it in the EVM. And so what this means is nobody, not even the validators, can front run, back run, sandwich attack, reorder. You don't know what it is. And so this is, I would say, polar opposite from Ethereum, from Solana, from pretty much all these L1s where they're either building MEV into the node or they're making it a part of the flow. And I'll pause there, but that's kind of the
Yeah.
the intro to that.
No, it's super cool. I guess, yeah, the question I would say is like, how many nodes do you guys have? And then is it possible, like what is the latency add to get that back and forth?
Definitely. So the as far as how many nodes right now, we're currently targeting. Have we announced this publicly? I don't think we have. I'm not gonna answer that question because I don't think we've announced that publicly
Is
yet.
it greater than
Um,
5?
yes, yes, much greater than five. So for context, scale chains run 16 nodes currently.
Okay.
Than
That.
it will be greater than a scale chain as of now.
Okay.
That is the plan. Um, as far as um, the latency, so that's a very interesting question. And that's something that's actually at the heart of a lot of research being done, not just by us, but also by some really great companies within the space that are actually researching kind of the performance impact of Ts. So for us, we have two forms of latency that occur. One of them is normal, right? Which is just how long does it take for the transactions and the blocks to all be broadcasted around the world? Obviously, the more decentralized you are, that can add time, right? So if your blockchain is all in one location, aka like a hyperliquid, uh-oh, lost my camera.
It's okay.
Sorry.
You're private. We're talking private stuff.
There we go. Um, so for example, a hyperliquid, no negativity here to them. They've chosen to put all of their nodes pretty much in the same data center. That gives them extremely low latency, extreme speed, and that's a trade-off they're willing to make for their platform. So again, no negativity toward them. That's just their design. We're looking to be more like a decentralized blockchain, right? So we'll be more like your Ethereum or your Solana in the sense of you'll have nodes all over the world and you're subject to traditional latency, which means on average, it is generally going to take at least a couple hundred milliseconds to get around the world. Now, a reminder, we do consensus before execution. Solana, for example, from my knowledge, does not. That's how they get down to their like 400 millisecond and now even faster blocks because they select a leader. The leader gets given transactions, and the leader essentially has full control of the chain for essentially their slot. And so they come to consensus after the fact through voting, and they would have to roll back if they had a disagreement. We don't have that. We actually come to consensus before. So the latency add is again going to be in most cases probably between anywhere between 50 and potentially even close to 400 milliseconds, right? Depending on like if you're going around the world. However, what's really cool about that is we only require the supermajority to approve, right? So we are a BFT based consensus. And so what that means is we don't require 100% of the network to agree. We'll have call it like n nodes in the network. So that could be 20, could be 40, could be 60, could be 80, could be 1,000, could be 10,000. Out of that n nodes, we'll call it like group C. C is committee. Committee is who's actively validating the set. So that would be kind of like our equivalent of a leader. The difference is we don't have one leader. We have n leaders, right? And the n leaders are the committee. They essentially work together to process those transactions and come to consensus. And so we don't have to worry about latency for the entire network as it grows. We only have to worry about latency for that core committee. Essentially, the faster those nodes are, the faster the chain operates. Um, there's additional latency between actual all the operations and the T, but that is essentially mitigated by having your T as close as possible to the node. Essentially, the closer the T is to the node, the faster you can do that. And there's a whole bunch of other
Yeah.
really amazing optimizations being done by our engineering team to reduce that to the bare minimum, make this thing as performant as
So I
possible.
guess if you guys aren't picking a leader, then how do you pick the order? Like that's
Ah,
the hard part, right?
yes. So historically, Scale was 100% random. In the V3 upgrade, we actually switched to a temporary, it's kind of like a temporary selection list. And so what happens is, I think it's every 64, if I'm not mistaken, blocks have a pre-selected validator, but the selection process is random out of the committee. So essentially, let's say you've got, just hypothetical, call it 25 nodes in committee. Based on their performance, every 64 blocks, the next 64 is randomly selected for which one will take and be the block proposer.
Yep.
But the fun part here is just because you have a pre-selected block proposer temporarily doesn't mean the remainder of the committee is pre-selected. So you could have, for example, let's say you're the proposer out of the next 64 blocks three times. All three of your blocks will be signed and attested by a different set from the committee. And so that's how we have this like it's a very dynamic form of decentralization where even though you have one validator who's proposing, they need two-thirds greater than two-thirds of the committee to essentially agree with them. And that greater than two-thirds is fully dynamic and not pre-selected.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, how does you're quizzing me on how Ethereum works, I guess. Because I believe Ethereum they have every 64 epochs or whatever they select a new committee as well. I forget what they call it even. But
Ethereum, Ethereum's is incredibly complicated. So they
yeah,
have,
it's very similar in they select like most people think all the validators are doing every block, but no, they break them into whatever all of these
yep,
different committees, and then they come to consensus and then pass it around. Um,
correct. Yeah, Ethereum's is I think that would be maybe like I'm actually happy to have a different conversation with you one day where we could just talk about consensus because it's a very interesting topic.
yes.
But high level, Ethereum, like pretty much everyone else, has different buckets. They've got different forms, and the biggest difference between um, something like this in Ethereum, at least from kind of my perspective, is Ethereum is also doing these kind of post-transaction, post-block attestations. And so you've got the proposer who proposes, and they can functionally propose anything they want. There's no limitation on what they can propose. Because of proof of stake security and collateral, you rarely see validators go malicious, but it could be done. And then what happens is after they propose, you have what they call checkpoints. Checkpoints occur every 64 blocks, I believe,
Something
which
like
is
that.
about every 12 minutes. And essentially, what you need is you need a block to be uh, attested either by, I think it's greater than two-thirds of the network, or you need it to hit two checkpoints. Once it hits two checkpoints, it's considered final. And so that can take, I have no idea what's going on with my camera. I apologize. That can take up to like 12 minutes, hence the finality for Ethereum being so long. And so the cool part about what we have is when you send a transaction, even if it goes through this encrypted format, as soon as it's added in a block, it's final. There is no rollbacks. There is no forks on that. There is no potential changes. You can't be tail bandit attack or time bandit attack. None of that is possible. And that's because we employ the only leaderless consensus in production where they're functionally due to the design, it is impossible for them to fork. Like they cannot. Like it's not allowed within their parameters. And
Well, you
so
you can social fork. I mean,
you can social fork the chain,
right.
and functionally that is a way to upgrade the L1. However, here's where things get really interesting is because of this design, we had to figure out how to roll committees without downtime, and that in practice solves the forking issue because let's say you've got 50 nodes in the network. 25 of them are in committee at any time, and I'm so sorry about the camera. I have no idea what's going on. I'm gonna actually switch here to a normal camera.
There you go.
That way it stops freaking out. So there we go. We'll see if that's a little better. So basically, uh, in a in a network where you have a set of nodes, and then you have a subset committee, and you're using the subset committee for threshold encryption, and you're using threshold encryption to come to consensus. Even without the encrypted transactions, you have to be able to go from committee A to committee B to committee C without downtime to the chain, which in practice is very complicated because you need to be able to have the transactions that are coming in be functionally able to come into committee A, but then be approved by committee B. And so that's something that some very magic engineering work by a couple of our amazing engineers, um, they were able to resolve this. And so what it actually solves in practice, or maybe it's, I guess, in theory, is even if the chain had a soft fork, you would have to have the committee be the ones who are actually doing the fork. And so because the committee is the one doing the fork, even if you change to a wholly separate committee, because of the design of the transactions, if you had like a malicious group try to break off, you would need greater than two-thirds of them to go. So you would basically need to hard fork the network in an attack.
Yep.
You can't just have like five nodes go. It would be a moot point, like moot attack. Um, and so we're protected from that because it would be a very expensive attack. It would cost potentially hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to attack. And even then, the users are still signing transactions for the existing committee. And so that would be very impractical. And from an upgrade perspective, even if the upgrade is a fork, you can functionally bake that fork into the committee change itself, which is really cool because that's something I don't think anyone's really done yet. So a little nerdy, but
Yeah, no,
um,
I like the design just because it was you guys reading it like you take some of the good pieces from Cosmos, some of the good pieces from Ethereum, and you guys it seems like your guys really looked around the space for what was working and what wasn't working, which was cool. I guess like anytime you're talking about T's and reducing MEV, would love to see how do you guys differ from Unichain's proposal. They're with Flashbots. I know that's what most people consider.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think the biggest thing is they are an L2. They're a single node, and it's a question of do you trust a single entity? I think that's kind of part one is do you trust that single entity? Do you trust L2s? Do you trust the design? And so I think that's kind of like part one for a lot of people. I think part two, because what I've kind of found over the last 6+ months of kind of talking with so many people about this MEV resistance and protection is 9 out of 10 users don't necessarily, they will not move from their current chain, even if you can save them 50 bips, which sounds crazy in practice, but it's reality. People are like, I saw yesterday some random guy, right? Coinbase recently did their integration of AMMs on Base to Coinbase, and so you can now trade off of like Aerodrome and stuff or Uniswap, via Coinbase centralized exchange app. This guy's doing a swap for like, $1,000 or something, or yeah, whatever it was. And he's got 3% slippage on there. And it's like people don't realize that when your slippage is set to 0.5%, 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, whatever it is, majority of the time you're executing at the worst price, right? Because you're getting reordered on, there's all these MEV bots, there's spam, whatever it is. And so the reality is people don't actually care about the slippage, which again to me is mind blowing because I care, but a lot of people don't. They care about the trading experience and the available tokens and things like that. And so that's why for Fair, and even for Scale, we're really focused on the use case capability of what our technology enables versus pure MEV protection. Because MEV protection is not a big enough moat. And arguably, I think we see that with Unichain. I don't know one person who's actually used Unichain. If you're picking between like an OP stack chain, 9 out of 10 times people are picking Arbitrum and Base. They're not going anywhere near Unichain from what I'm hearing. But that's also my small subset of people. Where we're focused is again that innovation, right? So I'll give an example. With Byte protocol, which is what actually enables this proof of encryption, uses all the magical BLS mathematics under the hood. One of the things you can do is encrypted triggers that are fully operated by the chain. This is probably one of my favorite use cases because I just think there's so much opportunity in Web3. A good example would be you want to do if then execution on chain. So, what that could mean is, for example, I want to do something where when the price of Ethereum hits $5,000, I want to go and execute some action. My trigger is public. So when Ethereum hits X, my trigger, everyone can see that. Nobody can see what my execution is. My execution could be I want to open an order on a prediction market. I want to sell Ethereum. I want to buy Bitcoin. I want to open I want to open a long on ETH on the perp dex. I want to deposit 10,000 into a lending protocol. I want to sweep the floor of some NFTs. The ability to basically combine protocols and combine triggers with actual execution, I think is something that is going to change how people work within decentralized finance because it actually makes things that are not so attainable for people attainable, which is most of the people that are making a lot of money are bots and automated services. This allows people to actually get involved with that, have it automated by the chain, and they're fully protected. I think that's one example of Unichain could, in theory, do that. But again, the whole point is they control the T. So just because the blocks are being built in the T doesn't mean that they can't control everything coming into the chain because they can
Right.
see the transactions before they get to the T. They're just doing block ordering within the T. We're making it where transactions can't be seen by the validators until post execution, or you can put encrypted data in a smart contract and the validators at a later point can execute that. That means on-chain wills can be fully decentralized and just automated. You can make, prediction markets are hot. Prediction markets follow these weird trends where it's impossible to kind of take like hedge bets against it. It's very hard to like market make a prediction market. We can do something where a prediction market could have it could be fully shielded. So instead of the prediction market going up and down, it could be I'm buying $10,000 of this thing happening and I settle at the best price. The best price is done all at once. All the orders get executed in like when the prediction market resolves or something. Like we can start to just do some really crazy things that are, again, I think more of that innovative side. Um, and I think that's kind of like step one. And then step two is, I mean, AI. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean that was going to be my next thing. It's obviously in the name. That's the
yep.
FAIR. Tell us what does FAIR have to do with AI?
Yeah, I think it's almost threefold. Um, so I think one, our belief is that, the majority of on-chain finance is already being automated. In most cases, it's through bots. There was a huge bot witch hunt, a few years back that kind of resolved itself when people realized, hey, we don't really care about bots, we care about making money. And so today, bots are everywhere, right? They're running strategies, they're being used by institutions, they're being used by individual traders. Um, but the thing that we haven't really seen too much of yet is autonomous finance, right? Like we see these things where you have to build a strategy, implement the strategy, monitor the strategy, but we don't really have this autonomous finance yet. And so I think for us, agentic DeFi is kind of like there's like two sides of it. One, at some point, may not be, it's not going to be tomorrow, but at some point, probably within the next few years, we're going to start to see people create probably some pretty decent autonomous agents. Give it some money, tell it what you're interested in, let it go to work for you. Is it going to be perfect? No. But is it potentially going to be better than what you can do manually? Probably because, well, blockchains are very inherently simple for agents and bots and code. The other side is simplified access, right? I think we're seeing this broadly with the internet, which is just prompt-based access. There's a couple really good projects we're working with that are wallets, and they essentially are doing, they're letting people come in and prompt, right, using this AI, this like ChatGPT style thing, and say, hey, what do you want to do? You tell it kind of what you're interested in. It does a bunch of research. It gives you options, and then you click and say yay, nay. And so I think kind of both of those are really interesting. And our belief is as that continues to pick up, you see more and more trading. What's going to happen is you are going to have an MEV problem, like an even bigger one, right? If we're already seeing billions of dollars being siphoned to MEV actors, if there's a trillion agents or a billion agents trading across all these chains, you are going to have more and more MEV issues. And so our belief is that letting these agents encrypt their transactions lets the agents actually make better strategies. They don't have to worry about losing 0.5% or 25 bips or whatever it is. They now save that money, and because they're saving that money, they can do more for you. They can actually make you more money, and that's why someone's going to want to trade on Fair as opposed to trading on a Solana, right? Because at the end of the day, why should you lose 1% on every meme coin launch you're trying to, FOMO into when you could save that 1% and every 1% you save on, $10,000, well, you just put a bunch of money back in your pocket, you can trade even more. Um, so I think that's a huge part of it. Um, there's some other really, I would say, like blue sky ideas that we've been playing with. I posted a blog about it, one of them the other day. Just this idea that, what if we had a scale chain that had AI in it? Like we have this amazing decentralized consensus. We've got the speed, we've got the T's. What if we threw some agents in there, right? Let people, instead of buying a server and running an agent on a server, what if you bought a scale chain, right? And then your scale chain had a T, your scale chain agent interacted with Fair, right? Now you can use this infinitely growing network to actually custody your assets and, secure things and just operate for you. So I think there's short term, it's more like agentic DeFi and autonomous DeFi that's really interesting. I think long term, there's just a lot of really blue sky opportunity to work with different partners and different protocols to build some just really game changing technology.
Nice. Yeah, no, I've done a few episodes now on a couple people trying to do different autonomous AI agents with blockchains. And yeah, I feel like I'm I cringe at the word agentic DeFi, but we can I agree it's one of these things like we're still waiting for agents to be agents in some way on chain.
Agree.
Um
Agree.
and yeah, so it'll be Yeah, I see maybe you can talk like the trends you see, but like a lot of people are trying, there's these like whether it's a prover network or AI operator networks, they're trying to combine AI, ZK and crypto and all of these things. Would you guys say you guys are competing with them? These are users of you guys. Um, yeah, or are you staying as far away as you can? I don't know.
I, I think it's more, I think like we could almost be an enablement for those people. Um, right. So most people don't know this because again, it's like this kind of gets really into the nitty gritty of how scale works. And it's one of the reasons why, as you could probably tell from talking to me, I'm very passionate about this technology because it's very different than everyone else. And one of the things that Scale has already done, and it's been live for years now, is this ability to containerize protocols within the nodes and have them operate using the decentralized consensus. And so I think for a lot of these, for example, if someone wants to run a prover, the problem with, I would say, majority of protocols today is they're just kind of copy pasting consensus. Like Tendermint has always been very popular, Comet BFT. There's a lot of these that are, very popular, but they don't actually bring you benefit if you're trying to do something very fast. Majority of these protocols would actually benefit from using our consensus because it's faster and it's provably final. Um, so a good example would be if you have a prover network for AI and you want to allow, or you're trying to combine a prover network with AI and you want to allow agents to run, you want to allow people to have some sort of ZK prover running, and you want to make this in a way where you're kind of combining all these best in class pieces. I feel like a good example would be, hey, if we put it all inside of a scale chain, we can utilize, we could shrink it, right? We can make it a four node chain. Now you've got four provers, you've got four small agents, and essentially you can, create a custom JSON RPC method, and basically it's like, hey, make a request. All these requests get funneled into the agents. They operate inside the T's, and then, or maybe they use the ZK side of things, and it uses the consensus to ensure that one agent or one prover is not going rogue in some way, shape, or form. Again, I think very blue sky for us. It's more just I think these are fun ideas to play with. But I'd say I feel like we could be an enabler of these technologies. We don't have to be competitive to them because getting the decentralized operators for all those things is historically proven to be relatively complicated, which is why L2s are arguably so popular. You just throw a node, you throw a server on AWS and you're up and running. But long term, is that viable for scaling to trillions of agents or trillions of provers? I don't think so. I think paying top tier validators to run those things for you is a nice kind of a nice maybe
Well, I mean,
cohesive way to grow.
yeah, like I feel like there's this split you've been seeing, like a lot of people, like in the past, like the Bitcoins and the Ethereums of the world, it was like, listen, we're all gonna run this program, like thousands and thousands of us are gonna run this exact same program and make sure we get the exact same output. And now it's moving into like, well, that's proving very expensive to pay people to do this. So like
Exactly.
how about we get one guy to do it and we can all just verify that he's right cryptographically. And it's
Yeah.
like moving that direction and then like some people think that that's like well which one do we want? Is there where's the balance? So
Right. No, totally. And I totally agree with you. And I do think that's where, if done right, I think we can get the best of both worlds. Or even to the point of letting a small chain that is running consensus backed by a ton of collateral, let them support with the verification. Um, Even if like they could just be running the provers themselves, right? Like it doesn't have to necessarily use like Scale's consensus or Fair's consensus. It could just be you're using the validators to help with the attestation and the provability. I think that's something that, I mean, it's all open source. You can go look the amount of code written, right? And the amount of testing and quality assurance done on these types of networks is quite literally, right, 7+ years compared to some of these VK provers coming out. And I think when you do start to get to like the enterprise level, that carries weight. right? Like, are you going to trust? Sure, you've got these, provable ZK things. Things is a terrible word, but things. Um, we've already seen, like, I think it was Succinct that had some really bad kind of backdoor vulnerabilities, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was a few months
I mean,
ago. Think,
even like Nomad, you can think from back in the day had some
yeah,
DK bugs. It's just
right.
hard.
It's 100%. And so I think that in itself is like, I think that's a great example of why we should almost be looking at both.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we don't need to be maxi one way or the other. We can combine these technologies because they're all powerful, but they almost complement each other from a security perspective and like backstop each other. So everyone in blockchain will, if they ever listen to this, will probably hate me and be like, no, you have to do one or the other. But that's kind of my outlook on it is I think there's just a ton of room to grow. And I think for me, as I work with developers and protocols, I don't want to force anyone to feel like Scale is competing with them from oh, you're a blockchain, we're a proving network, we can't work together. I feel like it's a question of how do we use this powerful scalable base that can literally grow to an infinite amount of nodes and computers to help them expand, get that security, get the adoption, and not have to worry about how do you do orchestration across hundreds of entities in the cloud securely across the world and not have 5-second latency and not have all these, backdoors and things like that. So,
Well, I mean, I think it's worth saying, if you saw like all the recent like Robinhood chain, for instance, like they're not using some fancy ZK super cutting edge tech. It's like just kind of an Arbitrum fork.
which,
Yeah.
which is so interesting because I actually left a huge response to one of the researchers on this yesterday. With Ethereum's announcement to go to the 10,000 TPS and go this risk five or risk V, whatever you call it, route. I'm not a ZK maxi here or expert, so um, I think what's so interesting is it kind of feels like a slap in the face if you are an OP chain because
Yes.
like Arbitrum and Base account for 95 plus percent of the TVL, the usage, the transactions, the value in the Ethereum ecosystem outside of Ethereum itself. And they basically said like, hey, your tech is not what we want to do long term. And it feels very disconnected to me. Um, and then it was funny because this morning I saw that, Succinct had announced they're doing something now with Arbitrum, right? And they're going to they already have a prototype and all this stuff. And I just think it's very interesting, and I think there will be a reckoning around this because going purely ZK almost feels anti Ethereum thesis. Like for me, Ethereum represents this idea that you can have all of them and they all work and they're all different, and that is part of the client diversity. It's part of the decentralization aspect. I think forcing everyone to go to one route that is so complicated and there's so few experts on is a very interesting move. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm a little bit suspect on it, or
Yeah,
whatever you
well,
call
I
that,
mean,
but
it's super hard in Ethereum too, because like as probably everyone watching this knows, Ethereum has a very nuanced relationship with rollups at the moment. Like, is this are they good for Ethereum? Are they not paying their fees and everything like that? So like, it's yeah, like I think there's a lot of complicated stuff and a lot of weird speak whenever they're trying to address these problems, just because like. Like they're all like it's actually like just like 50 people running all of these things. And then B, it's like everyone's bags are on the line for any different comment that they make. So it makes it really, really difficult um
yes,
to go which tech is best and which one should we do? It's like I don't so complicated.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, no, we know that honestly. Sometimes I feel like better than most, just because for those that aren't aware, in the very early days, when there really was no L2s, right? Like in like 2017, 2018, when the co-founders of Scale kind of put their heads together and started working on this, there wasn't really scaling solutions. There was alt L1s, and alt L1s were generally majorly frowned upon. Like people like they were very out there at the time, right?
It
Like
was it
they
was
were.
state channels and plasma. This was,
Right,
yeah.
right. And so the interesting part is in the early days, they kind of believed that Scale fell into the sidechain narrative, like Polygon. And I spent years actually fighting against this because I said, Polygon pushes checkpoints. They still use kind of this, like pseudo roll-up checkpoint state channel thing. Um, and Scale doesn't, right? Scale has never pushed data back to Ethereum. It has a bridge to Ethereum, but look at Hyperliquid. Hyperliquid's an L1, but it has a bridge to an L2. So you have to kind of, I feel like, bifurcate the bridging versus the actual state of the chain. And that's why arguably scale chains are layer one blockchains because they don't push anything back to a parent chain. They just are themselves. They do rely on Ethereum for the underlying security, but the actual core transaction state and consensus all occurs kind of internally, right, within the chain
Yeah.
itself. And so we've been around that for a long time, and I've always been very anti roll up personally, just because I feel like they don't deliver the promises. I think Scale has always been a better technology for scaling Ethereum. Um, and I think now that you're seeing this shift, I think there will always be roll ups, but I think it's a good question of, you know, if they kill off or they push out maybe their top ones right now, and they have all these other ones that are just not profitable, is it actually feasible long term for Ethereum to have rollups if most of them run unprofitable and it just gets cannibalized by, the top two or
Well,
three who don't even align technically?
yeah. Well, I mean, my first comment would be, I think what you meant to say is you want to disconnect the underlying tech from the narrative of what you are. And I feel like that's usually what most people want to do. They want the narrative of being ETH aligned with
Yeah,
the promise of whatever the hell they want to do. Um, but yeah, and I think like rollups, like I love rollups as far as rollups are a great bridge, right? Like if you like that, like you can have a rollup bridge to a lot of chains from your chain. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a rollup to that chain, if that makes sense. So
100%.
yeah, like I feel like like especially I see this now, like I trade some coins on base. They are minted on base and they will forever be on base. There's no Ethereum address even at all. So like
Yep,
what is the benefit of it being a roll-up for that asset? I don't know.
totally.
Probably none. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, it just is what it is. Um,
definitely. I'm with you there. I'm with you there. It's an interesting place to be.
yeah. Well, I guess back to kind of fair and AI, we're coming up near the end. I guess what kind of if you had like dream users to come build over there, what would some dream application be over on Fair?
Yeah, I think that's a big question because there's a lot of them, right? I think a core part of it for me is anyone looking to take the next step in terms of finance and DeFi, right? So like I mentioned, right, shielded prediction markets, you know, AMMs that have provable limit orders that are not, well, not broken, that just, huge price curve shifts. I think a big one for me is also lending with protected oracles. I think is really interesting. So um, there is very not well known. It's even something that I'm still like constantly trying to wrap my head around. But I've been doing a lot of research into OEV, which is Oracle Extractable Value, and it feels like the MEV protection naturally solves that, and could be something where, or helps solve that to a way where a lending protocol could have a lot better yield and reward back to the protocol because they're not bleeding that value out to liquidators, is my understanding. But maybe that's a separate conversation for later.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
mean, like on that, like I feel like this might hurt your MEV narrative as far as like OEV, like the way most of them would work, right? Like who does it like if anyone's allowed to update the Oracle, who gets in the block, right? Would be
yeah,
It would be a race, right? It would just be race conditions, like pure back to
Well, isn't that functionally how it works today, right? Is because you can see the Oracle update.
yes.
It is a race. They spam. They're all trying to get in there. Um,
Well,
if you
now
think of
that's the OEV protection is we'll just have an auction for who gets to do it. That's the solution to everything, right? You just have an auction and
yes, I think the interesting part is I think the interesting part is we don't see the Oracle update either.
no, but
That's where things get really interesting.
so like let's say it's an ETH USD lending pool, right? You know it's an ETH
Hmm.
US dollar price that needs to get updated. So like
Yep.
if we're using Chainlink or Redstone or Teller or anyone as your Oracle, you see their servers update.
Yep.
So now they signed the transaction, and now it's whoever can grab that signed transaction and put it over there fastest, right?
Yeah.
It's just going to be a
And
pure race. Like, so whoever is, it's like a technology thing, right?
yeah, I mean, I think this gets more to my point of we have we have the ability now to do private Oracle feeds and private transactions. And so I think this kind of gets to my point
So you
of
guys would just be the Oracle
no,
yourself,
no, no, no.
the chain.
No, 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 no. I'm saying the chain the chain can enable any Oracle to be private, right? So Teller could
No,
be
but it doesn't
private.
matter if it's private. Like, like if you know it's an ETH USD
Oh,
feed,
for sure.
like we can
I'm
all see
saying
ETH update in price. Like we all just have to
no, no,
raise.
no. That I agree with. I'm saying because we have private transactions, we've got encrypted triggers, we've got potentially, fully private state at some point. My point is more along the lines of what can we do next?
Yeah.
Like how can we build and make this something where we can make that OEV value that currently gets, raced for and fought for? How can we use that to make maybe the protocol more valuable to drive more interest to LP providers or, to make the liquidator bots, have maybe they don't have to waste gas spamming, right? Like maybe we can make this more profitable where there's some form of alternative just design is kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, can you guys? Oh, yeah, I think you guys should be the Oracle. Can't you set the? Can your validators read external sources? I guess would be the question.
Uh, yes, so we actually have fun
Yeah.
fact in Scale chains, we actually have a native Oracle.
Yeah.
It is a poll-based Oracle. So it's maybe not as performant, but as we talked about in our previous call, I don't think that necessarily matters. So I do think it's possible. Um, I think a good example would be we could potentially do something where each of the validators could pull five different sources. They can aggregate and then average or something, and then you've got some sort of average value from a bunch of different sources. Um, and then that essentially gets updated privately. I definitely think that could be something interesting.
Well, because then I
Um,
was saying if you have the hooks, you have also the hooks in the fair, then you could just write the liquidation in a hook, and then nobody gets the liquidation fees. It's, it just it's done by the chain.
but functionally, yes, it can be set.
Yeah.
It can be set. I maybe need to do a little bit more research into lending protocols on this, but anything that has a predefined price can be set with those triggers, which is kind of my point, right? Is
Right.
if you I think maybe a perp is probably easier for me to describe because I know more about them just due to working with protocols. But it's almost like someone takes out, they're longing Bitcoin, they're supplying X amount of collateral, their liquidation price is X. You can functionally, when they open up that long, preset their liquidation. You don't even need a race to your point. Like
Yes. Yeah.
there is no leak because your liquidation is preset. And when you supply, right, if price of Bitcoin drops, you need to up your collateral, right, and continue to supply. As you supply, your trigger just keeps updating according to the value. And so I think that's I think the interesting question there, and you may know this more than me, is how much money is leaked to liquidators And if we stop leaking that to liquidators, can we use that for protocol token buybacks? Can we use that for yield distribution? Can we use that for juiced up incentives? Can we use that for protocol revenue? Um, does that potentially give a new lending platform or a new perp dex the ability to become the next Aave or the next Hyperliquid purely because they don't have to deal with, they're literally making N% more for every transaction just for that reason.
Yeah. No, I agree. Um, I think these are the future designs. Like the fact that people get paid millions of dollars in arbitrage is market inefficiency. Like this
It,
should go away.
ex exactly. It should disappear, and that is literally revenue for that protocol. And if you are doing, I mean, even if you're doing only $1 million of revenue a day, you still pretty quickly start to break into a very profitable company. Um,
Yeah. No, I
like,
mean that's like
I mean,
I always yeah. I think
so
like whenever this space is finally mature, like I think all of the validators, the MEV operators, all that, it's all just blue collar work. Like they're just running servers and it's not this
agree,
skilled PhD arbitrage game. It's just listen, you just make a modest, it's a living wage or something.
agree. No, I totally agree. And I also think that's, it's very unique because that also falls back into, right, if the chain is providing the Oracle update, that could be where protocols are paying, they're tipping the chain, right? And so now you actually have a blockchain that, all these blockchains functionally from a token perspective are mostly the same, right? You're
Yeah.
staking, you've got this form of security. We do have some really cool stuff coming that hasn't been announced yet that'll be more innovative, but this would be a good example of another reason to, buy, hold, stake the token for a protocol because of the fact that you're saying, hey, I am earning back this value from the functionality, right? Not financial, legal, or security advice there, more so saying, I think um, from a Web3 perspective, that's a very unique positioning. Um, and it does start to bleed into the next wave of like worldwide innovation, right? So your autonomous agents, your agentic DeFi, they should have a lot more stable platform to build on. They shouldn't see this massive volatility. They shouldn't have all of these MEV issues. They should have more, we'll call them almost simple protocols. Like the protocol should get easier to integrate for these people because there's less moving parts, right? Or fewer moving parts. Um, so yeah, I think recap there for me is looking for people that looking for builders and developers who are building these things now, and they're probably going to go launch on a commoditized chain where they have zero edge. And simply by moving to this chain, they are differentiated because we can help them build these unique things into their protocol that make them differentiated compared to everyone else. And I think that that's pretty exciting for both the network, the team, and for myself as well as I get to work hand in hand with all these guys and people.
Nice. Well, yeah, we're coming up right on an hour. That where can people go find more? Yeah, even
Yeah,
how about you?
absolutely. Yeah, people can find more information on fairchain.ai, fair FAIR, chain CHAIN.ai. If you're interested in following myself or the project, it's on Twitter at fair_blockchain. The logo looks very similar to Scale. It's got a little blue AI. And my handle across the board, Telegram, Discord, Twitter, etc., is the Great Axios. So feel free to follow me. I talk about all of this stuff all the time.
Nice. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This was a blast.
Absolutely. Thank you.